Commander Marcus Webb had barely registered the proximity alert before his emergency pod tore through the planet's atmosphere like a meteor, systems screaming, hull plates peeling away in fiery strips. The impact drove the breath from his lungs, and when he finally clawed his way out of the smoking wreckage, he found himself standing in a forest that seemed pulled from a fevered dream. Trees rose like cathedral spires, their bark crystalline and humming with bioluminescent veins. The sky overhead churned with colors he had no names for, purples that tasted like copper, greens that whispered at the edge of hearing. His suit's scanner flickered uselessly, overwhelmed by radiation signatures it couldn't classify. According to his instruments, he was standing in the middle of nowhere. According to the consortium's star charts, this planet didn't exist. Marcus checked his supplies. 3 days of water, maybe 4 if he rationed. The comm unit was slag. The distress beacon had died on impact. He was alone, 70 light years from the nearest outpost on a world that officially wasn't there. He began walking, hoping to find higher ground, some vantage point to assess his situation. Instead, he found the clearing. It appeared suddenly as if the forest had deliberately parted. At its center stood a structure, or perhaps it had grown there, the distinction unclear. Organic architecture spiraled upward, walls of what looked like petrified amber forming a dome roughly 20 feet across. And within that dome, suspended in translucent threads that pulsed with rhythmic light, hung the cocoon. Marcus approached slowly, hand on the plasma cutter at his belt. The cocoon was roughly the size of a sleeping bag, its surface rippling with patterns that reminded him of oil on water. Through the semi-transparent membrane, he could make out a shape, small, curled inward, unmistakably alive. Then it moved, a limb delicate, four-fingered, pressed against the inner wall of the cocoon. The membrane stretched but didn't break. The creature inside shifted, and Marcus caught a glimpse of what might have been a face. Large eyes, dark and terrified, a mouth opening in what could only be a silent scream. It was a child. Alien, yes, but the proportions were unmistakable. The vulnerability undeniable. The creature pressed both hands against the membrane now, pushing, struggling. The threads suspending the cocoon began to pulse faster, brighter, and Marcus realized with horror that they weren't supporting it. They were binding it, draining it perhaps. The child's movements were growing weaker. He didn't think, he simply moved. The plasma cutter sliced through the supporting threads like butter. The cocoon dropped and Marcus caught it, surprised by its weight. The membrane was warm, almost feverish. Up close, he could hear something, a sound between humming and crying, muffled and desperate. "I've got you," Marcus whispered, knowing it couldn't understand him. "You're going to be okay?" He set the cocoon down carefully and adjusted the cutter to its finest setting. One wrong move and he'd slice through the creature inside. His hands were steady. Years of ship repairs had taught him precision, but his heart hammered as he began to cut. The membrane parted. Fluid spilled out, clear and smelling of ozone. And then the creature emerged. It was small, barely the size of a 6-year-old human child, with skin that shifted between translucent pearl and deep violet depending on the angle of light. Its eyes were indeed large, taking up nearly half its face, irises swirling with patterns like tiny galaxies. It had 4 arms, all thin and trembling, and when it looked up at Marcus, those cosmic eyes brimmed with what he could only interpret as relief. It made a sound, a chirp, almost musical, and reached for him with all 4 hands. Marcus pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around the shivering creature. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. The ground shook. Not an earthquake, something more deliberate. The bioluminescent veins in the trees flared bright crimson. The air pressure dropped so suddenly Marcus's ears popped. And from somewhere beyond the clearing came a sound that started deep below the threshold of hearing and rose into a wail that felt like it was trying to split the sky. The child in his arms began to shake, pressing its face against his chest. "We need to move," Marcus said, already running. Marcus had been running for 6 hours straight. The alien child clutched against his chest, and with each passing minute he became more certain that the world itself had turned hostile. The crystalline trees now bent toward them as they passed, branches reaching like grasping clasping fingers. The ground rippled beneath his feet, forcing him to leap over sudden fissures that opened and closed like hungry mouths. The sky had gone wrong. What had been strange but beautiful now roiled with storm clouds that seemed to possess intention, tracking their movement, gathering directly overhead no matter which direction he fled. Lightning didn't strike randomly. It targeted them, forcing Marcus to dodge and weave through the increasingly dense forest. And then there were the creatures. The first one had appeared an hour into their flight, a thing like a stag made of living stone, eyes glowing the same crimson as the trees. It had simply stood in their path, watching until Marcus had changed direction. Then another had appeared, and another, herding them, pushing them away from what Marcus had hoped was shelter and deeper into the wilderness. The child, Marcus had started thinking of it as Echo, after the musical sounds it made clung to him with surprising strength. It hadn't tried to communicate beyond occasional chirps and trills, but Marcus swore he could feel something from it. Fear, yes, but also trust. It burrowed against him whenever the lightning struck close, and once when he'd stumbled and nearly fallen, it had reached out one small hand to touch his face, the gesture unmistakably comforting. "I've got you," Marcus kept repeating like a mantra. "I won't let anything happen to you." As night fell, if night was the right word for the oppressive darkness that swallowed the landscape, Marcus finally found shelter in a cave system carved into a cliff face. The stone creatures didn't follow them inside, but they didn't leave either. They formed a perimeter around the cave mouth, silent sentinels with burning eyes. Marcus set Echo down carefully and began taking stock. His water was half gone. His suit's power cell was dying. The plasma cutter had enough charge for maybe one more use. And outside, the entire planet seemed to have mobilized against them. "What did they do to you?" Marcus asked quietly, watching Echo explore the cave with careful, measured steps. The creature moved with an odd grace, all four arms extended for balance, head tilting to examine the walls with those swirling galaxy eyes. "Why would anyone lock a child away like that?" Echo turned at his voice and chirped softly. Then it did something that made Marcus's breath catch. It reached out and touched the cave wall, and where its fingers made contact, the stone began to change, not breaking or melting, transforming. The dull gray rock flowered into the same crystalline substance as the trees outside, veins of light spreading outward in intricate patterns. "Jesus," Marcus breathed. "You're doing that? You're changing it?" Echo pulled its hand back, looking down at its fingers with what Marcus interpreted as confusion. Then it looked up at him, head tilted in a gesture that felt like a question. "It's okay," Marcus said quickly, though his mind was racing. It's beautiful, actually. But beautiful or not, it was information. The child had power, the ability to alter the world around it. Was that why it had been imprisoned? Some kind of dangerous ability that needed to be contained. Marcus was so lost in thought he almost missed the sound. It started as a vibration in the stone beneath him, so deep and powerful it made his teeth ache. Then it grew, rising through octaves, becoming a call that resonated in his bones, and Echo responded. The creature's eyes went wide, all four hands clasping together, and it made a sound Marcus had never heard before, a cry of pure longing. "No," Marcus said, moving between Echo and the cave entrance. "No, we're not going back there. Whatever they are, whatever they want." The stone sentinels parted. Something was coming through them, something massive. Marcus caught a glimpse of it against the storm-racked sky, a silhouette that towered 30 feet tall, moving with liquid grace despite its size. It had too many limbs, too many angles, a shape his mind struggled to process. "Stay behind me," Marcus ordered, pulling out the plasma cutter with shaking hands. It was useless against something that size, but it was all he had. The creature reached the cave mouth and stopped, and then, impossibly, it folded, contracted, compressed itself through some alien geometry until it stood at the entrance in a form that, while still towering over Marcus at nearly 12 feet, was at least comprehensible. Female, he thought, if the concept even applied. The elongation of the limbs, the protective curve of the body, the way she moved, deliberate, careful, as if trying not to fright. She had Echo's eyes, those same swirling galaxies, ancient and deep. "Stay back," Marcus warned, his voice cracking. "I don't know what you want, but I'm not letting you hurt this child." The being tilted her head, and Marcus heard something that might have been laughter. Then she spoke. The language was nothing human, all harmonics and resonance, sounds that seemed to bypass his ears entirely and arrived directly in his understanding. But somehow, impossibly, he knew what she was saying. "Child," the word carried amusement and sorrow in equal measure. "Human, that is no child." The being's voice wasn't sound, not exactly. It was more like meaning itself, bypassing language entirely and settling directly into Marcus's mind with the weight of absolute truth. He staggered, and the plasma cutter nearly slipped from his grip. "My name is Kayla," the towering figure said, taking one careful step into the cave. The stone creatures outside began to disperse, melting back into the forest like shadows at dawn. "And what you have freed is called Serac, the metamorph, the ending of all things." Marcus looked down at Echo, at Serac, who had moved to stand partially behind his leg, one small hand gripping his pants. The creature looked up at him with those cosmic eyes, and he saw nothing but innocence there. Fear, need. "You're lying," Marcus said, though his voice wavered. "Look at it. It's terrified. It's helpless." "All larvae are helpless," Kayla replied. "That is why we seal them, why we sing them to sleep, why we bind them in stasis until the convergence, when the moons align and the planet can sustain their awakening." She moved closer, and Marcus could see now that she was beautiful in an alien way, her form composed of the same shifting translucence as the child, but mature, complete. "You do not understand what you have done, human. That cocoon was not a prison. It was a sanctuary for us." Marcus's mind raced. The changes he'd witnessed, the hostile forest, the hunting creatures, the violent storms. The planet, it started attacking us after I opened the cocoon. "The planet is trying to protect itself," Kayla said softly. "Serac is metamorphosing. Even now, in what you perceive as its child form, it is beginning the transformation. Every touch reshapes matter. Every breath alters the atmosphere. In days, perhaps hours, it will enter its feeding stage. And when that happens," she gestured to the cave wall where Serac had touched it, where crystal now bloomed. Marcus looked closer and felt his stomach turn. The crystal was beautiful, yes, but the rock beneath it wasn't transformed. It was consumed. The stone's molecular structure had been completely broken down and rebuilt as something else entirely. "The feeding stage lasts 3 planetary rotations," Kayla continued. "During that time, a single metamorph will consume everything organic within a 1,000-mile radius. Plants, animals, the soil itself, everything becomes fuel for the transformation into its final form. We are a species of world eaters, Marcus Webb. We evolved to spread across the cosmos, to devour and rebuild, to transform dead worlds into new gardens of our making." Marcus shook his head. "But the cocoon! If you knew this, why bring them here at all? Why let them exist?" "Because they are our children." Kayla's voice carried an ocean of grief. "Because even knowing what they will become, we cannot unmake them. So we develop the convergence protocol. Every 1,000 years, when the celestial alignments are correct, we wake one metamorph. The planet prepares itself, evacuating all mobile life to the polar regions. The metamorph feeds, transforms, and then, if the timing is perfect, it ascends, leaves this world for the void, seeking dead planets to terraform, to give life to. It is our purpose, our curse, our gift to the universe." She knelt now, bringing herself closer to Marcus's eye level, though she still towered over him. "But the convergence is not for another century. The planet is not prepared. Its ecosystems cannot sustain a feeding cycle now. If Serac enters metamorphosis here today, it will not stop at transformation. It will consume everything. Every living thing on this world will die, including me, including you, including the 12,000 others of my kind who call this planet home." Marcus looked down at the small creature still clinging to his leg. Serac chirped softly, oblivious to the conversation, more focused on examining a particularly interesting rock formation. It looked so innocent, so helpless. "You could kill it," Marcus said quietly. "Before it enters the feeding stage, you could. should. We cannot. Kayla's voice was firm. It is not our way. We do not unmake our children, no matter the cost. We endure, we adapt, but we do not kill our own. She extended one long, elegant hand. The cocoon can be resealed. The stasis can be restored. Serac will sleep again safely until the convergence. No death, no extinction, just sleep and dreams until the proper time. Serac made a small sound, and Marcus felt those delicate fingers tighten on his leg. He thought about the cocoon, about those glowing threads, about what had looked like fear and pain on the creature's face as it had pressed against the membrane. It was suffering in there, Marcus said. I saw it. It was trying to escape. It was dreaming, Kayla corrected gently. The chrysalis induces a state between waking and sleeping. Serac experienced the dreams of transformation, the visions of what it will become. Uncomfortable, perhaps, strange and frightening to its limited consciousness. But not pain, never pain. We would never hurt our children, Marcus. We only try to protect them and protect ourselves from them. The cave had grown quiet. Even the storm outside seemed to have paused, waiting. Marcus realized this was the moment, the choice. Return Serac to its cocoon, seal it away for another century of dreams and isolation, or refuse and watch as the innocent creature in his arms became a world-ending catastrophe. What happens to it? Marcus asked. In the cocoon, for 100 years. It dreams of flight, Kayla said softly, of stars and void and the worlds it will one day transform. It experiences existence without hunger, without need, in a state of pure potential. When it wakes at the convergence, it will be ready. The planet will be ready, and Serac will feed and transform and ascend as it was always meant to do. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought about his training, about first contact protocols and non-interference directives. He thought about the 12,000 lives hanging in the balance. He thought about his own survival. But mostly he thought about the small creature that had looked at him with trust, that had reached for him with all four arms, that even now pressed against him as if he could protect it from the entire universe. There has to be another way, he said. Kayla's expression, if it could be called that, shifted into something Marcus recognized as profound sadness. There is no other way, human. This is the reality of what we are. Beauty and horror, creation and consumption, inextricably bound. As if responding to the conversation, Serac suddenly went rigid in Marcus's arms. The small creature's eyes began to glow brighter, the swirling galaxies within them accelerating. Its skin rippled, patterns racing across its surface like storm clouds in time lapse. It's beginning, Kayla said, her voice urgent now. The metamorphosis accelerates with consciousness, with stimulation. Your rescue, the chase, the fear, all of it has pushed Serac toward waking faster than it should. We must act now, or... Serac opened its mouth and sang. The sound was nothing like its earlier chirps. This was something primal, cosmic, a harmony that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequency of existence itself. The cave walls answered, every surface beginning to transform. Stone flowed like water, reshaping into crystalline geometries of impossible complexity. The air itself shimmered, taking on properties Marcus couldn't name. Oh God, Marcus breathed, watching his own hand begin to shimmer at the edges. Serac was still wrapped in his jacket, still clinging to him, but now he could feel something else, a pull like gravity but deeper. The creature wasn't just transforming matter, it was calling to it, drawing it inward. Kayla moved with startling speed, placing herself between Marcus and Serac. Put it down, Marcus. You must break contact before... Before what? Marcus demanded, but he could already feel it. His cells vibrating, his molecular structure beginning to resonate with Serac's song. In minutes, maybe seconds, he would become part of the transformation, fuel for the metamorphosis. But as he looked down at Serac, he saw something that made him pause. The creature was crying. Clear, luminescent tears rolled down its transforming face, and its eyes, those cosmic, ancient eyes, held an expression Marcus recognized from 1,000 human contexts. Confusion, pain, fear of what it was becoming. It doesn't want this, Marcus said suddenly. Kayla, look at it. It's terrified of itself. Kayla hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, Marcus saw the crack in her certainty. It is young. It does not understand understand its nature. That is why we shelter them, why you imprison them," Marcus interrupted. "You said you can't unmake them, that you endure their existence. But have you ever asked them what they want? They are larvae." Kayla's voice rose for the first time, harmonics fracturing with emotion. "They have no conception of bullshit." Marcus dropped to his knees, bringing himself face to face with Serac despite the dangerous proximity. The creature's transformation was accelerating, its body elongating, additional limbs beginning to bud from its torso. But those eyes remained fixed on Marcus with heartbreaking clarity. "Serac," Marcus said softly, using the creature's name for the first time. "Can you understand me?" The crystalline transformation paused, just for a moment, just long enough for Serac to tilt its head in that familiar, questioning gesture. Marcus thought about everything Kayla had told him, about purpose and curse and the gift to the universe, about world eaters that became world makers, about a species caught between what they were and what they needed to survive. "What if there was another choice?" Marcus said, not to Serac, but to Kayla. "You said they ascend after feeding, right? They leave this world for dead planets. What if Serac could skip the feeding? What if it could ascend now before it destroys anything?" "Impossible," Kayla said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "The metamorphosis requires fuel. Mass must be consumed to achieve the transformation to final form. Without it, Serac would be trapped between states, incomplete, in constant agony." "What about a ship?" Marcus turned to face her fully. "My emergency pod. It's wrecked, but the reactor is still intact. Refined isotopes, pure energy. What if that could substitute for organic matter?" Kayla stared at him for a long moment. Around them, the cave continued its transformation, reality becoming increasingly fluid. "I do not know. It has never been attempted. The energy requirements would be immense, and the process might kill me, might kill Serac, might fail completely," Marcus finished. "But it's a chance, an option that doesn't end with extinction or imprisonment." He looked down at the creature in his arms, at the being caught between what it was and what it would become. "Everyone deserves a choice, Kayla, even your children." Serac made a sound then, not the cosmic song of transformation, but something smaller, something that sounded almost like hope. Kayla was silent for so long Marcus thought she would refuse. Then slowly she nodded. "The pod, where is it?" They ran through a forest that was dying and being reborn with every step. Serac's involuntary transformation had spread like ripples from a stone cast into still water. Trees crystallized and shattered, their matter reorganizing into structures that defied terrestrial physics. The ground beneath their feet shifted between states, solid, liquid, something in between, forcing them to leap and climb through terrain that redefined itself moment by moment. Marcus carried Serac, the creature now significantly larger than when he'd first freed it. Multiple limbs had sprouted, and its body had elongated, becoming more serpentine. But it had wrapped those limbs around him carefully, deliberately, trying not to touch his exposed skin, trying not to hurt him. Kayla led the way, her massive form moving through the transformed landscape with impossible grace. She sang as they traveled, not words, but harmonics that seemed to partially stabilize the reality around them, creating temporary paths through the chaos. "The metamorphosis has reached critical acceleration," she called back. "We have perhaps 30 minutes before Serac enters full feeding mode. After that, the hunger will override all conscious thought." Marcus's lungs burned and his legs screamed in protest, but he pushed forward. The crash site appeared through the crystalline trees like a memory surfacing from a dream. His emergency pod was barely recognizable, half consumed by the spreading transformation, but the reactor chamber at its core still pulsed with the blue-white glow of contained fusion. "There," Marcus gasped, nearly collapsing as he reached the wreckage. "The reactor! Can you access it?" Kayla approached the mangled pod, her 4 primary arms extending to examine the technology. "This is beyond my understanding, human. Your species' methods are foreign to me." "Then I'll do it." Marcus carefully set Serac down. The creature had grown to nearly twice his size now, its transformation accelerating with each passing moment. But when it looked at at him, he still saw that same questioning intelligence, that same desperate hope. Marcus crawled into the wreckage, ignoring the sharp edges that tore at his suit, the warnings that flashed across his failing HUD. The reactor was designed with multiple failsafes, redundancies built on redundancies to prevent catastrophic failure, to intentionally breach it, to release its full energy in a controlled manner. It was insane, probably impossible. He began pulling conduits, rerouting power systems, overriding safeties with manual commands hammered into an interface that was half melted and dying. Behind him, he could hear Serac's transformation intensifying, the cosmic song rising again. Marcus! Kayla's voice carried warning. The hunger begins. He didn't look back, couldn't afford to. His fingers flew across the controls, years of engineering training taking over where conscious thought failed. The reactor's output began to climb, 110%, 120%, approaching levels that should have triggered automatic shutdown. But there was no shutdown left to trigger. Just Marcus, the reactor, and a choice that felt both impossible and inevitable. Kayla, he called out, when I release this, you need to direct it. Can you do that? Can you feed this energy directly into Serac's transformation? There was a pause. Then, I can try. Good enough. Marcus input the final command sequence, then hesitated. If this worked, the energy release would be massive, instantaneous. He'd need to be at the reactor's core to manually complete the breach. There was no remote option, no safety distance. He thought about his ship, destroyed somewhere in orbit, about his crew whom he'd never see again, about Earth and coffee and rain and all the small, beautiful things he'd taken for granted. Then he thought about Serac, about a child that had looked at him with trust, about a choice that mattered more than survival. Take care of it, Marcus said softly. Whatever it becomes, wherever it goes, tell it someone believed it could be more than its nature. Marcus, no. Kayla's voice carried understanding and horror in equal measure. There must be another way to. There isn't. Marcus pulled the final conduit free and jammed it directly into the reactor's core. 3, 2, 1, now. The reactor didn't explode. That would have been too crude, too simple. Instead, it released its energy in a coherent wave, a pulse of pure power that Kayla caught with her own form, becoming a living conduit. She channeled it directly into Serac, and the creature screamed. But it wasn't pain. It was transformation. Serac's body elongated, unfolded, became something that existed partially in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The feeding hunger that had been building released not outward but inward, consuming the energy Kayla provided, using it as fuel for metamorphosis without requiring the death of a world. The creature grew, changed, became something beautiful and terrible and utterly beyond human comprehension. And then, impossible as it seemed, Serac turned and looked back at the wreckage, at Marcus, whose body was failing, whose cells were coming apart in the aftermath of the reactor breach. The being that had been a child reached out with limbs that were no longer truly physical and touched him. Marcus felt himself transforming, but not into fuel, into something else. The damage to his body reversed, but more than that, he was being translated, lifted from purely physical existence into something that could survive what came next. No, he tried to say, but he no longer had a mouth. I chose this. Let me. Serac's response wasn't words. It was understanding, direct and absolute. You gave me choice. I give you possibility. The world fell away. Serac ascended, and Marcus ascended with it, his consciousness fragmenting and reforming into something that could exist in the spaces between stars. Below, he caught a glimpse of Kayla, staring upward with all her eyes wide in wonder and grief. The planet stabilized. The transformation reversed. Life would continue. And Marcus Webb, who had crashed alone on an impossible world, flew toward the stars with a being that was no longer a child, no longer a monster, but something entirely new, something that had chosen its own path. Kayla stood in the clearing where the cocoon had been and composed the final entry in her people's chronicles. She wrote of the human who had mistaken imprisonment for protection, who had seen a child where her people saw only danger. She wrote of impossible choices and transformation and the day everything changed. But mostly, she wrote about hope, because some somewhere in the vast dark between worlds, Marcus Webb and Serac were finding dead planets and bringing them to life, not through consumption and replacement, but through cooperation and choice, building something new from the ruins of what had been. Her people would remember. And when the next convergence came, when the next metamorph woke from its chrysalis, they would remember that there had been another way. That children, even world eaters, deserved the chance to choose what they would become. The forest sang around her, alive and whole, and Kayla sang back. A song of grief and gratitude, of endings and beginnings, of the lone astronaut who had saved a child and in doing so saved them all.